Did Jesus ever really claim to be God? One of the most common objections you'll hear today is that Jesus never actually claimed deity. Muslims often say Jesus never claimed to be God. Jehovah's Witnesses say the same thing. Many skeptics argue Jesus was simply a prophet or a great moral teacher who never claimed to be divine. But is that really what we find when we examine the Gospels and what Jesus said about himself? Today we're going to look at 7 passages where Christians believe Jesus claimed to be God by his words or actions. So for each claim that Jesus makes, I'm going to read the passage first, then we'll examine what it means in its context. By the end, you can decide for yourself whether Jesus really claimed to be God. So first, we're going to look at John chapter 8, verses 58 through 59. And Jesus said, Verily, verily, I say unto you, before Abraham was, I am. Then took they up stones to cast at him. But Jesus hid himself, and went out of the temple, going through the midst of them, and so passed by. Now notice what Jesus did not say. He didn't say, before Abraham was, I was. Instead, he said, I am. That language immediately reminds us of Exodus chapter 3, where God revealed his name to Moses as I am that I am. And we don't have to guess how his audience understood him. The very next verse tells us exactly what they did. They picked up stones to kill him. They believed Jesus had claimed something that belonged only to God himself. Next, let's read John chapter 10, verses 30 through 33. I and my Father are one. Then the Jews took up stones again to stone him. Jesus answered them, Many good works have I shown you from my Father. For which of these works do ye stone me? The Jews answered him, saying, For a good work we stone thee not, but for blasphemy, and because that thou, being a man, makest thyself God. So once again, Jesus makes an extraordinary statement. I and my Father are one. The Jewish leaders immediately pick up stones. Jesus asks them why they're going to stone him. And their answer is fascinating. Because that thou, being a man, makest thyself God. Whether someone agrees with Jesus or not, his audience clearly understood him to be making a claim to deity. So now, let's go on and read John chapter 14, verses 8 and 9. Philip saith unto him, Lord, show us the Father, and it sufficeth us. Jesus said unto him, Have I been so long time with you, and yet hast thou not known me, Philip? Ye that hath seen me hath seen the Father. And how sayest thou then, Show us the Father? Think about how astonishing that statement really is. No prophet, no angel, no apostle ever spoke like this. Jesus isn't merely pointing people towards God. He's saying that to truly know him is to know the Father. The Jews would have known exactly what he was saying. Next, let's read Mark chapter 2, verses 5 through 12. When Jesus saw their faith, he said unto the sick of the palsy, Son, thy sins be forgiven thee. But there were certain of the scribes sitting there, and reasoning in their hearts, Why doth this man thus speak blasphemies? Who can forgive sins but God only? And immediately when Jesus perceived in his spirit that they so reasoned within themselves, he said unto them, Why reason ye these things in your hearts? Whether is it easier to say to the sick of the palsy, Thy sins be forgiven thee, or to say, Arise and take up thy bed and walk? But that ye may know that the Son of Man hath power on earth to forgive sins. I say unto thee, Arise and take up thy bed and go thy way into thine house. And immediately he arose, took up thy bed, and went forth before them all, insomuch that they were all amazed, and glorified God, saying, We never saw it on this fashion. So we see the scribes asked an important question. Who can forgive sins but God only? They are right. Ultimately, every sin is against God, and only God has the authority to forgive it. But Jesus doesn't correct their understanding. Instead, he heals the man to prove that the Son of Man has authority on earth to forgive sins. And next, we're going to look at 3 passages together. First, we're going to have Matthew chapter 14, verse 33. Then they that were in the ship came and worshipped him, saying, Of a truth, thou art the Son of God. Next, John chapter 9, verse 38. And he said, Lord, I believe. And he worshipped him. Finally, we have Matthew chapter 28, verse 9. And as they went to tell his disciples, behold, Jesus met them, saying, All hail. And they came and held him by the feet and worshipped him. So throughout the Gospels, people repeatedly worship Jesus and even bow at his feet. After he calms the storm, after he heals the man born blind, and after his resurrection. And these are all clearly things that only God could do. What's remarkable, though, isn't simply that people worshipped him. It's that Jesus accepted that worship. He never tells them to stop. He never redirects that worship towards the Father. So for someone claiming to be merely a prophet, that would be an extraordinary thing to allow. As you know, we see John the Baptist denying that worship. We see angels in Scripture denying that type of worship. So now let's read John chapter 17, verse 5. And now, O Father, glorify thou me with thine own self, with the glory which I had with thee before the world was. Now see, Jesus isn't claiming that his existence began in Bethlehem, where he was born. He's claiming that before creation itself existed, he shared glory with the Father. That's a claim no ordinary human being or prophet could honestly make. Now finally, let's read Mark chapter 2, verses 27 and 28. And he said unto them, The Sabbath was made for man, and not man for the Sabbath. Therefore the Son of Man is Lord also of the Sabbath. The Sabbath wasn't merely a Jewish tradition. It was established by God himself. Yet Jesus declares the Son of Man is Lord also of the Sabbath. He's not merely interpreting God's law. He's claiming to have divine authority over it. So what should we make of all this? You'll notice something interesting. Jesus never simply walked into a crowd and said, I am God, worship me. But that's not how first century Jewish teachers typically communicated. Instead, Jesus repeatedly claimed the identity, the authority, and the glory of God alone. And his audience understood exactly what he was claiming. That's why they repeatedly accused him of blasphemy. And this is why C.S. Lewis famously argued that Jesus doesn't leave us with the option of calling him merely a good moral teacher. As Lewis wrote in his famous book, Mere Christianity, he says, a man who was merely a man and said the sort of things Jesus said would not be a great moral teacher. Either this man was and is the Son of God, or else a madman or something even worse. If these claims weren't true, then Jesus either knew they weren't true, making him a liar, or he believed them when they were false, which would make him delusional or a lunatic. Or he really is exactly who he claimed to be, which would make him Lord. Today we've looked at what Jesus said and did during his earthly ministry. But this actually raises another important question. Did the earliest Christians understand Jesus the same way? So in my next video, we will examine the earliest Christian writings and archaeology to see what the historical evidence tells us about whether Jesus' first followers worshipped him as God. So if you found this video helpful, please consider liking and subscribing and sharing it with anyone who would find this question interesting. And as always, thank you and God bless.